Hi guys, today I am going to show you how to make a closed tropical terrarium, a miniature closed ecosystem with its own water cycle so you never have to water it. I hope you enjoyed this video and please let me know if you enjoyed the content. First of all, you will need a drainage layer which helps deal with excess water. A filter separates the drainage from the soil and helps it from being clogged. Charcoal helps to purify the water from toxins and helps the terrarium smell fresh. The substrate can be most types of potting soil, although try to avoid one with too many organic compounds. Springtail bugs help to clean up the terrarium by eating dead plant matter and mold. And finally, decorative white sand helps to add contrast and is a nice way to finish off a terrarium build. A clear glass container with a lid that will allow enough sunlight and natural water cycle to occur. For the drainage layer, I like to add larger rocks as this allows large gaps in between in case of excess water, which will fill these gaps. Using a pencil, I draw around the container onto a fine mesh material. The cutout size is just slightly larger than the perimeter of the container itself, and you will see why later. I use scissors to cut out the mesh material, which can be any type of fine or woven mesh material that you can cut. You do not need to use a filter, although you will need to use smaller rocks in the drainage or the soil will just fall into the gaps. Because the filter diameter is larger than the inside diameter of the container, you can create a lip which will later hold the soil on top and prevent it falling down into the drainage. I add a bit of activated charcoal in this case to hold the filter in place and also to filter the water cycle when it happens. Most types of charcoal can be used if there are no added chemicals to it. Avoid using charcoal briquettes. I have a springtail culture which I will add to the terrarium. Springtails are beneficial to prevent mold, especially in the first few weeks of your terrarium, in which mold is likely to happen. Initially, the springtail population will thrive and rapidly reproduce, and eventually level out when there is less mold and dead materials to forage. For the substrate, I initially add a layer of pine bark and sphagnum moss to help retain the moisture, and also to act as additional filters to stop the soil falling into the drainage. However, this is not needed. I then add the potting soil into the container and even it out with a brush. I add a little on the left side, keeping in mind that you will add more soil later when you put the plants inside. For the plants, I use Vitonia or nerve plant, pillow moss, and asparagus fern, which all operate well in a tropical climate, as this is what we will be seeking to recreate in our terrarium. I use a brush to make a hole for the plants, gently placing the plants inside and plant it in by moving the soil around it. I like to place the red Vitonia as the centerpiece because of its bold color. The moss should fill the landscape and the asparagus fern fills the backdrop. I recommend using white aquarium sand to add a bit of contrast when you sculpt your tiny garden, and the color of the sand matches well with the rocks and contrasts well also with the green and red colors. Again, use a paintbrush to sculpt it. And finally, add some decorative rocks to finish off the piece and add visual interest. Some larger rocks were added to keep the moss in place. Next, I clean the terrarium using isopropyl alcohol so that when I water it next, the mud is not stuck on the glass and everywhere. Preferably water it with some distilled water, although rainwater, mineral water or filtered water is also fine to avoid the chlorine in the tap. Again, I clean it to avoid water spots drying on the glass. Finally, it is complete and now I put the lid on. If you see condensation forming on the glass, that is proof that the water cycle is working. However, if there is a lot of condensation all day long, it means there is too much water. A general rule of thumb I use is when you see some water dropping into the drainage as you're spraying it, that's when you need to stop. I hope you liked my video, and if you liked it, please don't forget to subscribe and I will be super grateful and it will encourage me to make many more videos.